I was thinking we could start with all the different jump heights, maybe? There's a lot of jump heights, but maybe just like stand still jump heights. So, do you guys know all the jump heights in this game? So there's like a standard jump where you just press the button, right? There's a crouch jump where you press the button and you hold crouch. And obviously holding crouch brings your legs up and pops you upwards just a little bit so you can reach slightly higher surfaces. And then you have, I'll call it like a short jump, but you hold crouch and then you jump while holding crouch. And that's like a shorter height jump than a standard jump, right? Now, there's two more.
Okay.
There's two more like main jump heights. Do you know what they are?
I don't.
I know the super jump and the spring jump.
The spring jump is one. So the spring jump is the highest jump from a standstill, right? Where you just, unless you're like spring thrusting, but you land on the floor and crouch, and then you have to release crouch, followed by jump within a frame of each other. So the timing is really tight. How do you use spring jump, NoPro? What control scheme do you play on?
I'll play on Recon.
Recon, okay. So you're using A button and left control stick, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you would have to like, you'd have to land on the floor, holding left control stick, and then release control stick followed by A. I'm sure you already know how it works. Basically, for anybody who doesn't know, you're landing on the floor and crouch. The next step is to release crouch, followed by jump. You just have to do the two actions within one frame of each other. So you have a 60th of a second to release crouch and then jump in order to hit the spring jump. Now, the other jump height is a short hop. Do you know what a short hop is?
No.
So short hop is a very low jump, where I barely leave the floor like that. Do you know how to do that?
Okay.
So, to short hop, you have to press jump and crouch together at the same time. Basically. Like that. You hit one right there. NoPro. Yeah, that's a short hop. Now, it's probably the least useful jump in Halo 5, like out of all the different jump heights. But it can be useful, depending on the situation. Like, certain ledges that are really low, it might make more sense to do a short hop instead. There's also an advanced technique to short hop out of your clamber, but we don't have to go there yet. But short hop is the other standstill jump height. You have to press jump and crouch together to do it. So that's kind of like the jump heights in general. And then you have things like abilities, right? Like you got your thrusting, you got your sprinting and sliding and stabilizing, and that all allows you to do, you know, a bunch of different maneuvers and techniques. So you, of course, you know how to stabilize jump, right? Like,
yeah,
hit that light post. Yeah, nice and easy, right? When you stabilize, do you have your auto stabilize on or off?
Off. I play off.
Yeah. Do you know, or why do you play it with it off?
Because when I zoom, when I was jumping, I don't want to stay stabilized every time.
Right. It's a pain, right? So by default in Halo, the game will automatically stabilize you when you scope in the air, and it ruins your jump, because if you're trying to jump somewhere and you just automatically stabilize, then it's going to stop you from moving forward. So it's a pain. On top of that, the stabilize in this game, if you have auto stabilize on, it'll activate the stabilize at like a set timing every single time, if that makes sense. So if I press the button to stabilize, the automatic stabilize kicks in at a set timing. It turns out that that timing is slower than what's humanly possible if you turn auto stabilize off. So if I turn off auto stabilize and activate it myself, I can activate it faster, and I have the freedom to activate it when I want to. So basically, if you want to stabilize jump, if you turn off auto stabilize and you learn how to hit it that way, you can hit it way faster and more consistently, basically. Like, you can hit higher jumps. The faster you get out of the stabilize, the better for hitting high jumps. And of course, if you're going to stabilize jump, you want to hold crouch as well. And by holding crouch, you get a slightly higher jump height, so you can hit higher ledges also. But the big trick with stabilize is to turn off auto stabilize. The only issue with that is it makes stabilizing kind of more difficult depending on control scheme. So if you don't claw, if you don't have paddles, it might be a steeper learning curve. That's all. But it can allow you to do it faster.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So that's something that's useful. What about animation canceling? So basically in this game, there are a lot of animations in this game, right? Like, if you thrust, it's an animation, and you can't shoot during the thrust timing, right? So it's important to understand the timing, like, around thrusting. Like, to shoot the instant before you thrust and the instant after you come at a thrust, right? If you can kind of master that timing, that's really helpful in combat. A reload is an animation, right? Every time you reload, you're stuck in the reload animation. Now, to stop your reload animation, normally what people do is they switch weapons. You can press YY twice. If you switch weapons twice, then you can go back to shooting again and cancel your reload. That's if you get caught in the middle of a reload, right? Something that people don't know, though, is let's say you're reloading and you're caught in the middle of a reload and you don't have a secondary weapon, you can sprint cancel your reload as well. So if you're in the middle of a reload and you sprint, it'll cancel the reload animation. So if you don't have a secondary weapon, you should try to remember to very quickly sprint cancel, and then you can go back to shooting. If you're in a, a situation where you need to shoot immediately. Now, the Y button cancel is useful not only for reloads, but it's useful for nades as well. So normally if I throw a grenade, I can't sprint right away, right? Like if you toss a grenade and then mash the sprint button, it takes a certain amount of time to sprint out of the nade throw, right? Like I'm throwing a nade, I'm mashing sprint, and it takes a long time to sprint out of it. But if you throw a nade and press the Y button immediately after throwing the nade, it frees you up to sprint right away. So if you nade Y button, you can sprint instantly. So the Y button is canceling the nade throw animation and allowing you to sprint and do other things. So if you want to move really fast on the map, it's important to press Y button to switch weapons after you throw a nade and cancel the animation so you can move more quickly. That Y button nade cancel not only applies to sprinting, but it also applies to stabilizing as well. So if I throw a nade and switch weapons in the air, I can stabilize immediately after. So I can, like, jump, throw a nade, switch weapons, stabilize. Normally I have to wait for the nade animation, but this way I can do it faster. Same with ground pound. I can nade, switch weapons, and ground pound immediately afterwards. So little things like that, like the Y button can help you move more quickly out of other animations like throwing nades. Or meleeing. If you melee, switch weapons, you can cancel your melee and sprint immediately, right? Normally you can't do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That nade trick, I don't know. Didn't know it.
The nade thing? Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Very important. The sprint one's very important. Like switching our weapons after you throw a nade and then sprinting is really, really crucial, and a lot of people do it. The other stuff, more situation specific. Of course, crouch jumping will get you over ledges without clambering, right? Jump and hold crouch, you can skip over ledges that normally would require you to clamber. Clambering is going to get you up to ledges easier, but every time you clamber, you're stuck in an animation, right? Which is bad sometimes. Sometimes if you clamber at a bad time, then somebody's going to punish you because you can't shoot right away. But there's a lot that you can do with the clamber if you know how to use it effectively. So skipping clambers when you don't need to clamber is important, but if you use the clamber properly, you can get places faster. For example, if you come to me, the clamber can allow you to scale ledges vertically, like this, right? I can jump out sideways, and I can jump clamber top mid. Normally a jump like this would be impossible without clamber, but in this, I can just jump. I basically turn my left stick out to either 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock, let's say, and 2 o'clock on a clock hand, if that makes sense. And then jump, hold crouch, hold clamber, and I can clamber up. So it gives me a whole new route. You can also drop backwards when you clamber, and you can re-clamber the ledge a second time. This is an advanced technique. I call it the drop back clamber. The cool thing about it is, NoPro, you can see me here, but I can shoot you and drop backwards while I shoot you, and it's very difficult to shoot me back because you can barely see my head, right?
Quick off the block.
Didn't mean to kill you, but yeah. Now this technique is really useful for faking out your opponents. If you can use it at the right time, then you can re-challenge, and they might think that you left and throw a nade, and you can catch them in the middle of the nade animation. You can catch them with their pants down, basically. The way that it works is you have to drop off the ledge and then clamber back up again, but you can't drop too far off the ledge. If I move too far away, like if I peg my left stick backwards and move off the ledge, I won't be able to reach the ledge anymore. So my trick to drop back clamber consistently is I hold crouch and I walk backwards off the ledge while crouching. By holding crouch, I cap out my base movement speed at a slower speed. So I won't fall too far away from the ledge anymore. It makes it easier for me to clamber back up. So I'll clamber a ledge and then hold crouch, walk backwards and crouch, and then reclamber. And I just do that. I hold clamber, or I hold crouch pretty much the entire time after the clamber. And it just helps me hit it more consistently. Don't have to worry about falling too far from the ledge as much. So that's useful.
That's an amazing tip.
Yeah.
That's really hard to do.
The drop back? Yeah, so depending on the ledge, it's easier or harder, right? So like if a ledge is very sharp, like see how there's like a sharp corner here? It's harder for me to drop back off this because it's easier to fall away from it quickly, right? Because it's a very sharp slope. But if you try this right here, it's easier to drop back on this thing because the slope is more gradual, right? Like it's not like a sharp corner. So depending on the surface that you're on, it's easier to use the mechanic in some places than others. And certain places, it's better to use than others. Top mid on Plaza, this is one of the best places in the game to use this mechanic because the ledge is perfect for it, and it's also a high ground spot on the map. So when you're using it, it's hard for people to see you. Now, if NoPro's standing here and I'm doing this, right, this is much less useful because NoPro... Oh, Jesus. NoPro can see me do this entire animation, right? So it's less useful. Whereas if NoPro's standing down here and I'm doing the drop back, now it's way more useful over here, right? Because you have way less of an angle on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it all depends on whether or not you have high ground, the spot that you're in. Like, this spot is good if players are below you. Ring 3 on Refuge is really good place to use the technique because everyone's below you. So they have less of an angle to work with. You can really take advantage. Now, we talked about stabilized jump briefly. There's also the thrust slide. Thrust slide is a very fundamental mechanic in Halo, right? You sprint, thrust, and slide. You guys know how to do that, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thrust sliding is pretty easy. The biggest thing to know is it's all about your control scheme, right? The first thing that you need to make sure that you do if you want to thrust slide is you have to go to your controller settings and you have to turn off toggle crouch. If toggle crouch is on, this technique won't work. I don't know why. It's just that it just won't work. Also, you should turn off maintain sprints. I'm not 100% sure how this contributes, but you also are supposed to turn it off in order for this technique to work. So turn off toggle crouch, turn off maintain sprint, and then all you have to do is sprint, thrust, and during the thrust animation, you can hold the slide button. So literally the instant after you press thrust, you can hold crouch, and you'll slide. You don't have to worry about timing the crouch. You just can hold crouch the instant after you press thrust. And then, of course, after you slide, you want to jump out, right? So you sprint, thrust, slide, and then jump out. Now, the earlier that you jump out of your slide, the higher the jump is going to be. The later you jump out of your slide, the lower the jump is going to be. And that's important when you're trying to hit really high ledges. So if I want to do a super jump where I combine the thrust slide with a stabilize, and I want to get right to top mid without a clamber, I need to make sure I jump out of the slide early so that I can pop myself higher up in the air, right? Yeah. Nice. So yeah, what you're doing there, I call it a super jump. Other people call it a bum jump, but basically you're taking the thrust slide and the stabilized jump, and you're combining them together. And if you want to master this technique, you need to be very good at stabilized jumping and very good at thrust sliding. Because you got to do them both back to back, right? So you're going to sprint, thrust, slide, and the instant after the slide comes out, you want to jump, stabilize, and hold crouch or mash crouch. Now, the reason why you crouch in stabilize is, I don't know if you guys know this, but if I stabilize, see how you gradually fall? Like, try stabilizing, see how your character gradually falls down? Like that, you just kind of fall and then you hit the floor?
Yeah.
If I stabilize and hold crouch, he falls, but he falls slower. it takes longer to fall. If you stabilize and hold crouch, you fall slower. Now, if you stabilize and mash crouch, you actually maintain your peak jump height into stabilize. And you don't fall at all until the stabilize runs out. Once the stabilize runs out, you drop and you lose all altitude. So if you mash crouch, you can maintain the peak height and stay at the highest altitude the entire stabilize. So knowing that, if you go for a thrust slide and you jump and stabilize, you want to make sure that you're holding or mashing crouch so that you can stay at that high jump height and you can get farther. For example, I can, you know, sprint, thrust, slide, jump, stabilize, and then I'll mash crouch to stay at peak jump height so I can clamber up to the ledge easily. Otherwise, it'd be very hard to reach it. So yeah, that's important to know.
Yeah, something like disable, toggle to crouch, and maintain a sprint is something that players like me do because we feel comfortable with that, but didn't know that we need to maintain that off to do this kind of tricks.
Right, so I know for a fact that it doesn't work with toggle crouch, but with maintain sprint, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to test it, but from what I've heard, you have to turn them both off, yeah. So, I mean, I could just give it a try right now and try to toggle crouch. Right, like, yeah, so I'm using toggle crouch and I can't thrust slide. It doesn't work. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you have it off.
Okay.
Yeah.